Love you, Dolly. Precious. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the long version of the short passage that Ruthie just read. The church at Corinth had more troubles, more problems, more fights, more disagreements than any other church in the New Testament. That's why we believe it was a Baptist church. Paul was so upset at them that he wrote 2 Bible letters plus 2 others. There are 4 letters to the Corinthians. If you read the Corinthian correspondence carefully, you'll see there were 4 letters written. 2 of them have been kept to deal with practical, everyday problems. And since churches still have fights, if you are a member of a Baptist church, you're either in a fight, getting ready to fight, or just came out of a fight. That's what it means to be a Baptist. We believe in the priesthood of believers, which means you have the freedom to argue and make yourself obnoxious if you want to. All right, so that's what we believe. And so we use it well. We practice the priesthood of believers very well. Unfortunately, we do it sometimes in ways that's not really that well. Church members can be terribly unloving. Some of the meanest people in the world can be so-called Christians. They can be downright cruel to each other. And our bickering often reaches legendary levels. When it comes to squabbles among church members, truth can be more bizarre than fiction. I was once pastor of a small church that had split over who should have the keys to the kitchen. What made the situation even more bizarre was there was a huge hole in the side of the wall where they served food through, and you could lean over and unlock the kitchen door if you wanted to. You didn't need the key anyway. Another church that I knew about many years ago split over whether the hymnal that they used should have round notes, which is what Baptists have always chosen basically. Should we use round notes or shaped notes? I've forgotten the names of the churches, but trust me when I tell you that people in town for years called them shaped note church and round note church. Another church I know of split over whether the piano should be on that side of the platform or that side of the platform. And all over this country, churches have split right down the middle over what we call the worship wars. Maybe the worst oxymoron in the English language. How can you put the word worship and the word war together? All of my lifetime, the battle over music has raged. My daddy, who died at 91 about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, my daddy went to his grave believing that drums and saxophones were of the devil. Never got over it. Never got past it. I was a kid that brought drums in. Daddy thought that was terrible. I became pastor of a church that had 5 saxophone players in the orchestra. Daddy just thought that was terrible. Went to his grave believing that. We've been fighting these wars my whole lifetime, and I am 69 years old. Traditional versus contemporary. I have an uncle who loves God with his whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, who calls praise choruses the row, row, row your boat part of the church service. I have another friend who calls praise choruses the 7-11 part of the worship, where you say the same words 11 times. Now, if you think it's bad the way old people don't like contemporary music, you know the only thing that's worse is how much young people hate traditional worship. Aha. Caught you off guard on that one, didn't I? See, old people will go to music, praise, worship, contemporary music, because their kids and their grandkids, they'll go. They'll even I've had friends who put the plugs in their ears and go because they want their kids and grandkids to know the Lord. They go to church with them. But you will not, very rarely, will you ever get a young person to attend a church that has traditional music. So the hatred of the music goes both ways. Everybody's just about equally guilty. Don't ever stand up and say, well, those people need to get a grip. No, everybody's bad. Everybody's got a bad spirit about it. Just deal with it and let's get on with it. I'm going to tell you my favorite story. Now, I shouldn't tell you this story probably, but I'm just temporary, so I don't care. This is a great story. It's a great story. I had the sweetest mother-in-law that you've ever known. My mother-in-law, she's in heaven now, Lord rest her soul. She was a dear, godly woman, but she hated the chorus As the deer panteth for the waters, so my soul longeth after thee. Remember that? As the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longeth after thee. Remember that? As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after thee. She just wouldn't let it go. She would not let it go. And so finally one day we were at lunch after church on Sunday. We had sung that song that morning at church, and boy, we were going at it. Back and forth, debating the pluses and minuses of the song. I held my trump card till the last second. I knew I was going to win this argument. I knew I had it. And finally, when I felt that she had finally said all she was going to say, I said, Mrs. Shuey, that is a direct quote from the Bible. The Bible says that. The Bible says it. I thought I had won. Don't ever think you beat your mother-in-law. I thought I had won. She fired back without 1 second's hesitation. I don't care if it's in the Bible. I don't want to be singing in church about a deer in heat. I lost. The list of church feuds could go on and on. There are people in this, you could stand up and tell about church feuds that are just bizarre. And meanwhile, while church members are arguing over causes that we think are really important, a lost world watches, shakes its head, and says, those people don't look like they're following a Prince of Peace. And that was the tragedy unfolding at Corinth. The battle royal was engaged. 1 Corinthians 12, spiritual gifts. 1 Corinthians 14, tongues. As I said, still things that we argue about. My daddy was one of 12 children who grew to adulthood. One of 13, one died in infancy, 12 grew to adulthood. 8 remained Baptists, 4 became Pentecostal. I grew up in the war over spiritual gifts and tongues. I know the battlefield really well. And right in the middle, 1 Corinthians 12 and 14, you have this wonderful chapter about love. Now, don't miss the lesson. Like I said, it's a tragedy that there's chapter divisions here. It's awful. 12, 13, and 14 should be one chapter. Here's what Paul is trying to say. No matter how you feel about spiritual gifts, no matter how you feel about tongues, you must love one another. It is okay to disagree. You must love one another. The great lesson of Romans 14 to me, when I preached through Romans word by word, when I got to Romans 14, and you had those who wanted to eat meat that had been sacrificed to pagan gods, and others who said, no, it bothers my conscience, I'm not going to do that. And Paul takes that whole chapter, Romans 14, and talks about, should you do this and do that? It is interesting. He never one time told them to agree. One of the biggest mistakes that we make in Baptist churches is when there's an argument, we try to get everybody to agree. If we got everybody to agree, we're no better than Pharisees. Even Pharisees like people they agree with. The whole point of Romans 14 is to say that you disagree. It's okay to disagree. You still love one another. That's what you do. You still love each other even though you disagree. You don't try to convince others to come to your position. It's okay to share and talk, but you don't try to strong-arm somebody. You love. Whatever you think about spiritual gifts, what do you think about tongues? You love each other. It was not until my generation of my family, my dad's generation, they never learned to love one another. It was my generation. I have a cousin whose dad was Assembly. My dad's a Baptist preacher. We learned to love each other and disagree. That's what we're called to do. So now, with that as background, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Are you ready? Lean over to the person next to you and say, that's the longest introduction I've heard in a long time. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Here we go. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Now stop right there. Tongues of men and of angels, that refers to speaking in tongues, and it refers to just talking about spiritual things. And a sounding gong and a clanging cymbal is not like the cymbal that you see in an orchestra. No, no, no. It's just metal. It's somebody clangs something against and makes a loud noise. Paul was saying, it doesn't matter if you speak in tongues. It doesn't matter what you believe about spiritual gifts. It doesn't matter if you talk in religious ways and people just really think you're a nice church person. If you do not have love, you're just like somebody taking a hammer and hitting a metal wall. That's about the good you're doing for the kingdom. Now look at verse 2. And if I have prophetic powers, anytime you see the word prophetic or prophecy in the Bible, that's preaching. If I have prophetic powers or preaching powers, we would say, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. Do you see the triple failure? If you do not have love, do you see the triple failure? Number one, if you do not have love, our preaching is wasted. I know preachers who preach of hell as if they hope people will go there. I know people who are so harsh they've driven more people away from the kingdom than they'll ever win to the kingdom. I hate it. I just hate it. I hate it. I hate it. That it was my older years before I came to realize that my tone of voice was driving many people away. I look back on sermons I preached. My theology has not changed. My position has not changed as for what I believe about certain issues. But my tone of voice was driving people away. Always remember, your calling is not to win arguments. Your calling is to win people. To be winsome. To be kind. And I will stand before the judgment seat of Christ someday, and I will answer for the tone in which I preached about certain sins with an anger that could almost make them feel like, my goodness, you act like you almost hope that I don't ever get saved. That drove them away rather than brought them closer. Few scenes in the Bible are more pitiful than Jonah moping under a gourd because God forgave his enemies. Isn't that terrible? But there are some in this room. You dislike gays. You dislike immigrants. You dislike Muslims. We could just go on, couldn't we? Transsexuals. You'd actually almost be disappointed if they began to draw close to God. If they came to our services and sat in here. A better example is Paul the Apostle, who said about the people who were persecuting him and wanted him dead, the Israelites wanted him dead. He said, I wish that I could go to hell, that they would be saved. Romans chapter 9, verse 3. I wish that I could be accursed. Please send me to hell, if it'll cause them to be saved. When was the last time of those groups that I mentioned that you ever prayed anything like that? That you even thought that maybe your tone, your voice, like I had to look at myself. Number two, without love, not only is preaching useless, knowledge is wasted. If our knowledge is not seasoned with love, then spiritual intellectual knowledge will become spiritual intellectual snobbery. Now, when I started preaching through the Bible word by word many years ago on Wednesday nights, Sunday morning, Sunday, and like I said, half of the Bible. I got through half of the Bible. Just putting the holy book on the sacred desk, and here you go, just like we're doing right now. You take a verse after verse after verse. My mentor was Cliff Palmer, a longtime pastor at First Baptist Church, Springdale, Arkansas, now Cross Church, the massive mega church down there. Cliff Palmer warned me. He said, now, John, let me warn you. When you preach from the Bible, verse by verse and word by word, your people begin to think that knowledge of the Bible is very important. He said, that's really good. He said, but the great danger of a Bible teaching church is that the knowledge becomes more important than the love, and Pharisees develop. He said, if you're not careful, you will build a church full of Pharisees. Because you can have knowledge and love your knowledge, love the Word, but if you don't have love, then your knowledge is wasted. Number 3. Without love, faith is wasted. You can have faith to be able to call down the power of heaven, but if you don't have love, it's all wasted. James and John went to Jesus. They were not being treated well in Samaria, the province between Galilee and Judea. Judea and Galilee. Judea and Galilee were full-blooded Jews. In the middle was the province of Samaria, where the Assyrians had taken Jews out and brought Gentiles in. And so they were half-breeds right here. They were not pure Jewish. And so up here they were up in the hill country, and down in the capital area of Judea, they're full-blooded Jews, but they hated these people in the middle because they were a mixed race. And James and John one day got a little mad while they were in Samaritan territory, and they said to Jesus, let's call down fire from heaven and destroy this village. That's a pretty good amount of faith, folks. And Jesus had no use for that, and he rebuked them. Because faith will make you a fighter, but love will make you a hero. It'll make you a role model. It'll make a life worth living. All right, let's go on. Verse 3. Now, verse 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 3. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Wow. Many of us never thought about that. You can give to the poor and it'd be a sin. You can help people who are not as fortunate as you are and it'd be a sin. Yes, sure. Even benevolence profits us nothing if it's done for the wrong reason. Some people give merely for display. It makes them look good in the eyes of others. Some people give to demonstrate their superiority. When you give. Now, when I was pastor at Second for 22 years, I had a credit card, and the deacons told me, don't you ever eat with anybody and let them pay for your meal. 22 years. They said, you buy every meal that you eat. So I took the church credit card, and I did what they told me to do. And as the years developed, I got to where knowing that I was buying almost became a mark of superiority. Then when I retired and I had to turn in that credit card, it was humbling to have to go and not be the one paying the bill. See, so I learned it is possible to give, which I was doing using the credit card, but actually in a way something had happened inside of me and it had become almost a way of showing off. It is possible to give, to offer a rebuke or give a lecture. When my son was young, he wanted to play the cello, and cellos are very expensive instruments. We didn't have the money for that. We were young. We've done well now. God has blessed us in our old age, but when our kids were little, we didn't have the money for that. But I had an uncle who was well-to-do. He heard that we needed a cello, and he offered to buy that cello for us, but everybody in the family he ever helped, they became beholden to him. They owed him. He lectured them. He rebuked them, and we turned down his offer. It is possible to give just to get rid of some troublesome duty. It's easy to give money to a beggar, like the people at the street corners. It's easy to give them money. In fact, if you're stopped right by them, it's easier just to give it to them than not to give it to them. See, it is love. Love is the sheen that makes our giving beautiful. Love is what takes it from being something selfish, from it being about us. Love makes it about them, to where that even when I give to the poor, I want to make sure that I do not sin. Now, the purpose of preaching is to help. So if you are going to hear the message today and be blessed by it, then I must help you figure out how to do that. So I'm going to tell you real quickly 5 things that I think will help you do a better job of loving people. Yes, you need to write them down. Write them on your shirt sleeve. If you don't have a shirt sleeve, write them on the sleeve of the person next to you. Write them on your hand. I've had young people write them on their fingers, and then they wash them off when they get home. But you need to write these down because these will help you. These are 5 things that will help you in learning to love one another. Number 1, you must pray. I'm not giving you these 5 things as if you are able to do them yourself. You are not able to do them yourself. You do not have power to live the Christian life. You do not. That's one of the great dangers about the prayer. Now listen to me. You're going to hear me talk about prayer a lot while I'm your interim pastor. I'm going to say a lot of the same things over and over again. It's okay. Once again, I'm temporary and I don't care. So you're going to hear some things over and over again. Here's one of the things you're going to hear. Be careful about the prayer. Lord, help me be a better Christian. Be careful. Lord, help me love people more. Because inside that prayer, you might be saying, Lord, I can do 80% of it myself. All I need is 20% from you. You need 100% from Him. Paul said, I don't live anymore. Christ lives in me. It's not 60% your power and 40% God's. It's 100% God's till the day you die. You've heard me say it before. You're going to hear me say it till I leave you. You live the Christian life the same way you came into the Christian life. You came before God and you said, I cannot help myself, period. That's why you live the Christian life. You don't come and say, oh, God, help me. I'm almost there. I can almost do this. Stop it. You come into the presence of God and say, Lord, I need a miracle. If I'm going to love people, you are going to have to help me make it happen. Now, in the matter of prayer, I think the greatest thing that you can do in the matter of prayer is to pray for others. Somebody who has more time than I have said that the New Testament commands us to pray for one another more times than it commands us to love each other. I don't know if it's true. I'm not going to take the time to find out. If somebody else wants to do that, that's fine. But it tells me that the New Testament is very serious about this matter of praying for one another. Now, it's interesting. There are many of you who you are very uncomfortable saying to another Christian, I love you. I believe that when you pray for somebody every day, you pray for them daily, and you look them in the eye and say, I pray for you every day, you are saying, I love you. There are people who cannot say, I love you, who could say that, and it's a great help to them. For me, once again, I was old before I found this. I was in my 50s before I finally discovered this, just like I had walked through the terrible discovery of myself being too harsh on people not like me. As a pastor, when I finally began to pray over the cards of my people, that's when God changed my life forever. When I began to pray for them, and I would see them, and I would say, I prayed for you every day this week. It changed everything. Now, you can do that only if you have some system of prayer. If you do not have a system to pray by, you will end up praying for me, my four, and no more. Now, you're going to hear that a lot while I'm here. If you don't have some organized way of praying for people, always, your prayer life shrivels down to me, my four, and no more. There's no exception to that rule. I pray over people that I know well, people who are going through tragedies and troubles. Ty Harmon, pastor at Galloway Church in Springfield, I prayed for him for years, and he knew that. And so he called me one day. He said, I want to bring you something. I said, okay, right in the middle of COVID. Got on his bicycle. I met him out in the yard. He handed me this thing. It's a thing. It's a ring, the leather binding on the front and back, that you can pray for people. And so the people that I'm really close to, that I really pray for urgently, or I feel the need, I put them on this. Now, I find this better than a list, because if you take a piece of paper and you write names on a list, you can read the whole page and your mind went somewhere else and you didn't pray for them. But when you have to touch a card and then turn it for at least a second or two, that person is on your mind. And you actually pray for them. Then, in addition to that special prayer ring, I have a prayer folder. You can tell it's very expensive. Now, in here, I already have your staff and your deacons. And I'm praying already 2 days a week over each page. And here's some very pressing, urgent emails. I print out emails. Emails are wonderful to print out and put in a prayer folder. Here's your staff on separate cards, because I want to pray for them every day, them and their spouses. Then I go through, then I have a prayer list of my main prayer needs, and then I have different prayer requests for different days of the week. There's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I've learned if you pray for the same thing every day, you get to where you don't see it. Then, a year ago, the North American Mission Board asked me if I would pray for 100 pastors in Missouri and stay in touch with them. And I do that. And here they are. This is the whole NAM folder here for me. There's the first 25 in alphabetical order, 26 through 50, 51 to 75, 76 through 100. I send them an email the first of the month and tell them I will pray for them for 2 weeks. Or any requests they have, there's no request, I tell them I will be praying. Like this month, I'm praying none of them will get COVID. Over 50% of them have responded to me. When they respond, I print out the email, I stick it in there, and I pray. Now, why do I share this with you? Once again, it's not to brag. It's not to, what do I care? I've already made it to the top of my profession. I'm retired. I have nothing to gain by telling you this. I'm just telling you, if you don't have a system, you won't get it done. You got to have a system. Pray systematically. Number 2, and this is all under prayer now. Number 2, you got to make love the number one priority of your life, and you cannot do that by yourself. It's not in you. You are a sinner saved by grace. You have an old nature. You cannot make love the number one priority of your life. Only God can do that. The problem at Corinth was they emphasized preaching and teaching and tongues and healing. That's natural. I was a mega church pastor for 22 years, folks. That will get right in here. You can think when you stand in front of a couple thousand people to preach every Sunday, you can start thinking that's really important. You can really start thinking you're somebody. Fortunately, I was married to Love Incarnate, who always reminded me, always, she was the example. She reminded us we're not the big dogs on the hill here. We're not that important. Love is the most important thing. So number 2, you got to make love priority number 1, and only God can do that. It takes a miracle. Number 3, you've got to invest time, and only God will help you do that. You know what's the number one thing hurting the American church other than pride, maybe? Addiction to adrenaline. You're living too fast, folks. Your prayer life, you cannot have your eyes on God and clock at the same time. Hurry is the death of prayer. Hurry is the death of love. If you're going to love people, you have to slow down once again, right here. When I'm talking to you, I hope I will come to love you, and I hope you will love me. But I will tell you one of my big sins, and I've got several of them. One of my big sins is when I'm talking to you, I'm already looking over your shoulder to see who the next person is I can schmooze with. Because I'm always in a hurry. I got lots of people I'm trying to talk to and communicate with. I got lots of stuff going on. My mind is always going 90 miles an hour. That's awful. That's an addiction to adrenaline. I had to marry this lady to learn what it means. If you're going to love people, you got to stop. I was at the Deacons and Wives Fellowship last night. I got to preach this morning. Ruthie, I got to get out of here. I got to preach. I got to study. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I grab all my stuff. I get to the door. I turn around. Uh-oh. Where's Ruthie? Well, she started with this couple. And I think when she gets done with them, she'll come. She goes to the next couple. Then the next couple. She goes around. So I've learned from her that it takes time. And it takes a miracle. It takes a miracle. When you come to church, could you practice love here? Rather than arrive just before the service starts, would you arrive at 1:45? And pat a kid on the head? And tell an old person you prayed for them every day this week? Church is not a ball game. You don't arrive just in time for the big event and then you leave. Church is where we come to love one another. Come early, stay late. Find one another. I love you. I'm praying for you. What can I do to help you? Number 4, you got to value people. When you go to work tomorrow, the most important thing in your office is not what people can do for you, not what they can do for the company. The most important thing in your office is the person. Is their kid sick? How's their marriage doing? People matter more than anything else. They're made in God's image, and these one-liners, you just poking at people, and hitting them. You cannot say you love God when you're poking His image right in front of you. Only God can help you do that. That's a miracle. That is an absolute miracle. Only God can do that. And then number 5. Do you remember what I told you the other day about sentences are the most important part of a sermon? Remember what Hosea Blue said? Sermons do not change people. Sentences do. Here's the main sentence of the whole sermon. Ready? Here it is. Act lovingly regardless of how you feel. One of the biggest heresies in the church today is you have to feel it before you do it. You have to feel like you love somebody before you do. That is totally backwards. Almost always you do, and then you feel. You do it, and then comes the feeling. You're commanded to be kind one to another. It doesn't tell you to do it because you like doing it, because you feel like doing it. You act in loving ways because you've been commanded to do so. You might not stand the person. You can't stand the person you're dealing with, but you know what? You're going to love them anyway. You're going to be kind to them. You're going to be gracious to them. It doesn't matter how you feel. Who asks your opinion? What does it matter what you think anyway? Who are you? Where do you come into the equation? What matters is here's a child of God, and you have a chance to bless them through a kind deed. Jesus did not go to the cross because he felt good about going to the cross, or happy about it. He went to the cross even though the night before he was screaming out to his Father if there's any other way. So if you're a Christ follower, love is first of all a matter of the will. You do it first. You do love, then the emotions follow. We first do deeds of love, then we have the feelings of love later. Now, all of those take miracles. I'm not setting myself up as a great example. I don't. I'm a power-driven, A1 personality guy. I can run over people pretty quick. I know how to get stuff done. And sometimes getting it done can be more important than the person. And so when I stand before you and say, these take a miracle, I know whereof I speak. Don't say, Lord, help me love people more. Don't say, Lord, help me spend more time. Lord, help me value people. No, don't do that. Because the danger is you'll think you're 75% there. Or you're a pretty nice person. God, just help me a little bit. No. You must pray these things and say, Lord, I cannot do this. If this happens, it will take a miracle. One of the great things about preaching is you know when people are done, and you are done. So we're going to stop right there. All right? You've had it. Your can is full, and you're going to have to go home and really think about that. And some of you are going to have roast preacher for lunch. I'm a pretty sweet guy, so it should taste pretty good. As far as I know. Okay, all right. Okay, let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Enough for today. Now, where'd the message meet you? If it didn't meet you anywhere, you weren't listening to the sermon. This is us. This is our life. This is who we are. This hits us, every one of us. Now, I have stood in front of you, pastor for over half a century, and I've told you I'm a sinner. I've confessed to you. I've shared with you, this is where I am. This is my weakness. These are my problems. Now, the sermon is useless if you don't do the same. The sermon is wasted if you do not now respond in the same way. So, wherever the Lord met you or called your attention to himself in this sermon, I want you to pray about that right now. Pray really hard. And I want you to pray for me, that God will continue to work a miracle in me. You're going to know me for weeks or months or whatever. I want you to pray for me, that I'll be holy, Christ-like, a good preacher, that I'll preach things that you need to hear. And so pray for me and then pray for yourself. God, help me. God, I cannot do this myself. I need a miracle. You're going to have to do this in me. And while Christians pray, if you're not a believer, you're not a Christ follower, maybe somebody said something to you this week, or maybe there was something in the music or in the sermon that caused you to say, okay, I'm ready. it'd just be wrong for us to come into this room and not give you a chance to know Jesus. He's everything to us. We love him. We worship him. He is God. And we'd love for you to know him. Now, I want to lead you in a little prayer. The prayer won't save you. It's not magic, but maybe this will cause you in your heart of hearts to really say to God what you really mean in your heart of hearts. The words themselves aren't as important as your attitude and the spirit and you're yielding yourself to the Lord. If this prayer will help you walk closer to the Lord or to come to him, to know him in a personal way, if this prayer will help you in that way, then you repeat it silently as I pray it out loud, phrase by phrase. Here it is. Dear Jesus, I am sorry for my sin. Please forgive me. Come live in my heart. I receive you as the master of my life. Amen. All right, everyone, would you look right here? Everybody looking right here at Pastor. Now, if you've received Jesus, the Bible says the first commandment for you is you've got to let it be known. You believe with the heart, but then with the mouth you confess. So we want you to come. Gary and Brother Devin will be up here to receive you as you try to make your decision for Christ. Maybe you just want to come, kneel, and pray. Mercy's sakes, after a sermon like that, maybe you just need to pray. Maybe you need to join our church. Maybe you need to come, be a part of us as we take this next step of this pilgrimage, as we move toward getting another pastor. Just whatever decision you need to make. We want to sing a song, give you the chance to come while it's on your heart, while it's heavy on your mind. Come. As we stand and sing a hymn of invitation, you come. Come right now as we sing.